Ladies and gentlemen, what's happening? Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to be diving into the mind of a seven sales figure entrepreneur who's not only achieved extraordinary success, but has also spent decades teaching others how to do the same. And so, Brett has built a reputation for mastering the art of sales, creating scalable systems, and developing principles that deliver consistent results across industries. So, if you ever felt stuck, which many entrepreneurs do, you're not alone. Okay. You probably feel overwhelmed sometimes with sales in particular, or unsure really how to take your sales game to the next level. And that's really what this conversation is about. So we're going to go ahead and unpack some strategies that Brett has. He's going to share the principles and systems he's used, and the idea is that it's going to help you break through barriers to stay ahead of the curve and help others do the same along the way. So, without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Brett Rademacher. How's it going, brother?
Well, first of all, I'm laughing. When you get an introduction like that. First of all, it's very kind, Gordie. Thank you. Second of all,
Yeah.
Anybody that's entrepreneurial is usually a little bit weird, and you start figuring that out when you're a kid and you're doing different things. And one of the labels they may put on you is a. When I was a kid, it was ADD. So this was in the '60s, and then now it's AHDD or whatever.
Sure.
And but. When you say the one and only, in most cases, that's probably all you need, because most people go, you're too much as it is. My wife would agree. We've been married 30 plus years and have 8 kids. So
Wow.
uh,
Congrats.
anyway, you get to a point in your life where you've gone through a lot of things in your life, and you learn a few things. And if 85% of what you learn is what not to do, then it kind of helps you get focused. And I think that's a big part of you
Mhm.
know getting older, maturity, experience, and it helps others dial in. Now everybody's got to walk
Yeah.
their own unique path, right?
Sure.
So there was a guy that did a video I watched a number of years ago that was really insightful, because he said you could take everything that Elon Musk did or Jeff Bezos did to be successful, their 10 steps to be successful,
Yeah.
and you would not be able to repeat their success. And
Mm.
and that's because each one of us has our own unique journey. Now that doesn't mean we can't glean something from it, but we're not going to go take the 10 steps to be Jeff Bezos
Yeah.
and repeat that and become like Jeff Bezos. But there might be an element of what he did that you can add to your toolbox. So
Mhm.
so when I do calls like this, first of all, I'm not here to sell anything. So, there's not a pitch at the end. So let's
Sure.
get that out of the way. Number two is, what I want to do is give some ahas and some insights that people can add to their toolbox, right?
Mhm.
But all of us have to figure out our own unique journey.
Absolutely.
So, I just want to lay the stage for that. And then you can ask me some questions. We're going to do this, I guess, interview style. And then hopefully there's some things in here that will really take people's mind into a higher place of thinking,
Yeah.
and their philosophy, their belief system, their operational skill set, how they apply these things. How's
Yeah.
that?
That's awesome. Yeah,
Okay.
it's great. Yeah, totally meant for it to be conversational, and
Yeah.
that's the reason why it's a kind of an interview style here. So
Yeah.
not your average day webinar. If you're
Yeah.
used to jumping on a
Exactly.
webinar, again,
I
we're
think
not.
these are the best.
Yeah, this is gonna be fun. So
Yeah.
you can also, for those of you that are listening, obviously you've been tearing it up in the comments already, and thank you so much. We want engagement. Please feel free to drop your comments in the chat as well. If we can't get to all of them, then we'll be following up with you afterwards as well, and maybe sharing some insights, etc., from your questions. So please don't hesitate to do that. I'm super excited that Brett's willing to do this, because it really is about imparting his knowledge, his wisdom, his experiences onto those who are willing to receive it. I'm one of those, hence the reason why we're doing it. So let's get into it with this. I want to qualify the conversation, if I could, a little bit. And let's say qualifying it in the sense that, you know, people jumped onto this because they seen a graphic, an advertisement. They might have received a text from me or somebody else, etc. And maybe something caught their attention as like a headline grabbing type of thing. But Brett, tell me about kind of where your journey started in the realm of sales, and kind of how you got your entrepreneurial journey started in as short of a window as we possibly can
Okay.
crunch it in.
Okay. All
Give
right.
it to
So
me.
that's always tough, especially,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm 62 now. So real quickly, I had an aptitude for sales when I was very young. Um, and that meant like selling raffle tickets, knocking on doors, collecting bottles, doing newspaper route, mowing lawns, that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
And but I never thought of this as a career. And then what happened? I was in the Marine Corps and started going to college after I got out. And my dad sent me to a sales. My dad had been a Navy fighter pilot, then retired. He had a real estate company, and he tried to get me into real estate. I wasn't interested. I'm taking classes on college in college for commercial art. That was my, that's what I thought I wanted to do. And my dad, for some weird reason, signed me up for a personality profiling class, and it listed. And you take it, and the guy at the end said, "If you ever decide to get into sales, I'd love to see your career. You'd be really good at it."
Really?
And I was like I never, I don't think most people when they get into sales when they're younger think I want to get into sales. It's kind of like nothing else appeals to me. I can make good money in sales. Sounds like I don't need a college degree. I'm going to try that. That seems to be a consistent pathway. And I've trained tens of thousands of salespeople, and that there's something about sales that kind of gravitates us. That a certain type of person like gravitates toward. So I'm going to school, doing a few things on the side, and I decided I didn't want to be an artist, a commercial artist, and I thought I'd try sales. And here's a few points I just want to point out. I started out selling encyclopedias. I got into being a stockbroker and all kinds of things. But what was really interesting is when I got into sales, there was two things I noticed, and I think almost every salesperson can identify with this. Number one is pretty much every company I got involved with initially, the sales training was really bad, taught by somebody that wasn't very good. And the other thing is there was a lot of unethical sales tactics. And as a result of going through that, a few experiences, and then, I tapped into Zig Ziglar's sales training, which was really about who you were as a person and character. And that was foundational to realize, you can do sales a different way. And that led to me starting my own companies, but driven around me being the primary sales driver. So I hope that helps.
Oh, that's great.
Okay.
I mean, encyclopedias to stocks. I mean, you were all over the place. It looks
Oh
like.
yeah, encyclopedias while I was still going to college. I ping ponged into some different classes, and then I had a friend that owned a brokerage firm, and he said you'd be really good as a stockbroker, and then that led into that. And my whole life's been a progression of one thing leading to another, and kind of following the breadcrumbs, as the doors opened up.
Absolutely. You mentioned something a little bit earlier that I want to point out regarding kind of these perceptions, if you would, that people have around the sales world. And you mentioned the character aspect of it. And, we've all heard the term like used car salesman, right? As the example.
Absolutely.
I don't look at sales as like a dirty word, right? I look at it as sales as helping somebody down a decision-making tree, if you would. But I want to talk about the principles that you've lived by or you've developed over time that have helped you in your sales background and how that's implemented into somebody's life that operates in sales. Because anybody that's an entrepreneur doing business, they have to get this sales thing down, right?
Yeah.
And without having the proper principles in place, I would say you're probably going to crash and burn at some point in time.
Yeah. So let me preface that answer with a short story about an experience I had when I was younger. So one of my first real sales jobs was selling waterbeds. So that was in between encyclopedias and being a stockbroker. And it was a company that was a franchise type operation, or they had multiple locations. They were based out of California. They came up to Washington State. And I was the only person they hired that didn't have a lot of sales experience. They said, we hired you because of your attitude and your energy. What was really interesting is they used a sales process called the system that came out of selling cars in California. So it really was a used car sales approach. And I got to see this firsthand, and it was quite manipulative.
Wow.
And I was not able to adapt to that, and yet I was one of the top salespeople. And so philosophically, one of the things that you have to realize in sales is, however you were raised, you have some kind of moral metric about how you look at people, how you treat people. And I had a certain metric. If your dad's a Navy fighter pilot, there's a real high level of character. And he wasn't just a Navy fighter pilot. He was a Blue Angel. He was a test pilot. I mean, my dad was the stuff.
Yeah.
Was one of the first guys to go through the Top Gun school,
Hmm.
the real Top Gun school. And so when you have that metric of morality and how you treat people, and you get into sales, you find that metric there's a lot of conflict, because in sales in general, now I'm not saying this for every salesperson, I'm not saying this for every company, but from my experience over 40 years of being in sales, is most companies, salespeople just look at people as a cog to make a commission off of,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I understand that. I mean, I understand that, because that's the nature of the industry, and the challenge for all of us when you're in that environment. And it's different for entrepreneurs, because you have the opportunity to break that chain, right?
Mm.
But you're coming in as a rookie, no experience, no reference point. So you're typically getting into some kind of sales system that looks at people like that, treats people like that. And so that's what you think it is, right? You think
Mhm.
that is it. And if you don't have a reference point or a standard outside that, you get sucked into believing that's how sales is. And the big problem with that is you start looking at all people like that, not just in sales.
Mm.
You just start looking at people as a means to an end.
Right.
And I understand that, and it's a challenging thing. How do you look at people, like you just said? How do you look at people as, how can I help you? Is what I'm doing a good match to help you get with whatever you're trying to get out of the situation? And is it fair? Is it
Yeah.
equitably fair? And so I think philosophical. So that's why when I look at sales, the first thing that you have to get grounded in is your philosophy of how you look and treat people, because everything basically emanates out of that. And the second thing is, every company has a philosophy of how they do business, a philosophy of how they sell, a philosophy of the product that they're selling. How was it built? There's a philosophy behind every product. And in order to be very good, very successful at what you're doing, your philosophy has to line up with the company's philosophy as much as possible to
Yeah.
allow you to go full tilt.
Wow. It reminds me of, you ever heard of EOS?
EOS?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's that stand for?
Entrepreneurial Operating System.
Okay. No.
No? Oh, it just reminded me of that. I literally just picked up a book, but it
Oh,
talks
okay.
about that.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah. But anyways, we'll circle back on that
Yeah.
another occasion. But you mentioned something that I want to tap into around systems in just a second. But I want to circle back just a little bit and say, share with us an example, if you would, or one of the biggest hurdles that you personally had to overcome early on, and how you overcame that to then build momentum in your career, because you've had a lot of success in this space, but it couldn't have always been that way, right? And so when you were starting out and really getting things moving, like what were some of the challenges you had that ultimately you were able to overcome and build momentum?
Okay, so I'm gonna say two things really quickly, because they're really foundational for being successful, whether you're in sales or an entrepreneur, and that is, pay attention to everything. Like, all parts affect the whole.
Yeah.
Pay attention to A to Z.
Yep.
Everything matters, and you gotta pay attention. You gotta ask questions, and you gotta listen. Okay. And if you take what I just said there and apply that to every aspect of whether you're in sales or an entrepreneur, or just a business owner, and there is a big difference between entrepreneurs and business owners,
Yeah.
and entrepreneurs have to be all of it, and is that you have to have those three skill sets: pay attention, ask questions, and listen. And when I say listen, I mean listen to the things that aren't being said. It's one of the most important skills, and you'll learn as you go on your journey. There's a lot of things in a conversation or in a process that are not advertly spoken, but you will pick up. Usually, it's from getting your head smashed into the wall. That you can find opportunities, and you can also find potholes. Okay. So as a salesperson, we're still staying on the salesperson
Sure.
framework, right?
Yeah.
This is one of the, and I learned this in encyclopedias, and this is so important as a newer salesperson. So I had this guy, and I'm still going to college, and this is funny story. So we were selling encyclopedias. We had to generate our own leads. how we did is we go down to the county records. We'd get the list of people that just applied for marriage applications.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
And then we would call them up. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. So we're calling up to sell people encyclopedias who don't even have kids yet, for the most part, right? And they're not going to have kids that can read for like 5 or 6. Talk about a tough sell. But the concept was people were so battered by the time they had kids for buying encyclopedias. You got to get them before they have kids, right? So that's tough sell enough. But the guy that was the sales manager was phenomenal. He literally had an 8 out of 10 close rate. Wow. 8 out of 10. But he was not duplicatable. He had the most quirky, kind of bozo personality, and he was a terrible sales manager. And the reason why is because he wanted you to be him. And that meant personality-wise, style, talk like him, say things the way he said it. And it was, unless you were like him, you couldn't do that, right? Yeah. And so one of the most important things, and it is hard, very hard when you're starting out, is you got to be you. You got to be genuine. You can't come off saying things the way somebody else can. And that's why sometimes scripts, I like outlines better. That's why sometimes scripts, especially like if you're prospecting or something, are very detrimental, because you're having people talk out of their framework of their personality, the way they speak, their attitude, their tone is a word that gets used, and I don't like the way it's used nowadays, but the way you are. And one of the things that I do when I'm, running a sales process or, training sales teams, I don't do that much anymore. It's mostly other stuff, but, is my number one emphasis is to get people to be themselves, their best self, and that's why you talk about personality mindset. But if you're trying to emulate somebody else's personality, you're going to crash and burn. It just doesn't work, because it's not you. You have to be genuine. You have to be yourself. And that's a foundational thing for every new salesperson.
All right. Well, not to get too philosophical on this one then, but I want to ask the question then. So if a person needs to be cognizant of being true to who they are in order to be able to communicate with people in a manner that's authentic, how do they go about figuring that out? How do they go about understanding?
Okay, that's a really profound question. We live in a culture that our culture is what happened 2 minutes ago, right? So we don't know what culture is anymore. And what do we mean by culture? Culture means like how you were brought up. Like if you go back to like Native American tribes or any Aboriginal type culture, okay, hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, they had a very structured process of how they raise kids up to be adults. Like I was reading a story recently about this one Native American tribe, and the women picked the chief, and how and one of the reasons why is they watched the children grow up into adults, and they knew everything about this kid and how they became an adult, and if they felt this kid who's now an adult would be an effective chief. Now imagine that. All right. So we have a real challenge, especially for young people today, is there's no culture, there's no foundation, there's a lack of framework of how to live, principles, how to live. And we've lost that as a society. And so a lot of times people don't even know who they are. And I remember even with my upbringing, that was a bit of a challenge, because my dad, being a fighter pilot, was gone so much of my life on tours and duty stations. So, the amount of time he was there to be a father was limited. And so you get out in that world, and all of a sudden you got to figure out who you are. But here's the thing I want to point out about one of the things about being in business or being an entrepreneur, being a salesperson, is that it forces you to look in the mirror and go, okay. And it's hard. And that's one of the things that people don't realize. The top salespeople, if they don't have this kind of foundation of who they are as a person, then they have to go through the process of getting this, and they don't even have a reference point to where it starts. And this is one of the reasons having the right mentor. A lot of times sales managers are sales managers because they were the top performer or they're the
Sure.
last guy standing. I can't tell you when I was younger, I'd be in sales organizations where the guy that was the manager was there only because everybody else had quit and he finally rose to the top, or he was best buddies with the owner. He wasn't necessarily that good of either being a salesperson or a sales manager. And these people are generally, they're just about hiring and firing, get somebody that can fog a mirror, make sales. And that's a tough place. There's not a lot of mentorship in sales. And I believe a sales manager needs to be not a manager, but a sales mentor, right? And you need to help younger salespeople navigate this road that challenges every aspect of the personality. Because, like, say for example, you have a bad day, you don't make any sales, there's pressure coming on down, down the pike at all levels, make some money, pay the bills, wife's wondering what's going on, boss is saying you need to make me money, whatever those are. How do you navigate all those pressures?
Right.
Somebody's got to, in a positive way, help you process those and channel those into a productive outcome, right?
Yeah.
It's
Right.
not easy. And so the first thing when people are looking for sales jobs, you got to find somebody that's, and this is why it's so hard, and this is why there's such high turnover is, and I did the same thing. I remember this when I was younger. I applied to a job about selling life insurance, make six figures. Now, this is in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Six figures now is nothing. Six figures in the 80s was something.
Yeah.
So I got this job of life insurance, got the test and everything. And so I'm sitting at the table. Now, keep in mind, I have an aptitude for sales. So that's not the issue. I'm sitting at the table with my first prospect, going to talk about life insurance. And in the middle of the conversation, I had this epiphany. And here was the epiphany. I could care less about selling life insurance. Okay. And that was my one and only presentation. And why did I make that mistake? Is because I was lured by the idea of making six figures, had nothing to do with having an interest in people being involved in buying life insurance.
Wow.
I get the importance of life insurance, but personally, I could care less about selling it, right?
Yeah.
And so you have this self-discovery process that you almost have to smack your face against the wall in order to find out who you are. So it's kind of a real-time thing. So mentorship is one thing. Training. I do want to say this on training is, and I made this massive mistake. I used to have a sales training library. It wasn't just sales training. It was personal development, marketing, mindset, huge library. I probably had $50,000 into it at one time. I've been in seminars as much as $25,000 for a single 2-day seminar or 3 days, whatever it was. And the problem was now it's a real benefit because I had pumped so much information into my head. But the problem was for a while is I had so many divergent opinions and thoughts and philosophies. And there's a million ways to make a sale. Okay. And every sales trainer will say, my way is the best way. No, it's not the best way. And it's not the best way for everybody. Right now, but everybody needs a starting path to get off the runway of a basic framework. And then and so when you see somebody that's a master at sales, what they've done over time, trial and error, failure, is create a toolbox of skills that they use that works for them. Like there's guys that I see on the internet touting their training program. There is no way I could ever sell the way they sell. If somebody put me in that sales environment and said, you got to sell this way, I'd go like, I'm going to be eating spam if I had to sell that way. And so that's part of the process is finding out who you are and how that works within a sales context. Because ultimately, I know this sounds a little weird. Ultimately, being in sales, in a way, is like painting your own canvas because it's who you are and an expression of everything that you know and your philosophy coming into contact with helping people get the best outcome for their situation or problem.
Yeah, that's good. That's good stuff. I hope you guys are taking notes on this because we're dropping some gems here. Brett's dropping some gems. Take some notes on this. A couple times we've heard this phrase or word about systems, and I know you're notorious for systems, and sales is as much about systems as strategy, I believe. So I'd like to hear about some of the systems that you've created or leveraged in your journey that have helped you, with performance and consistency and being able to then transition on to the next level. Talk about systems if you
Oh,
could.
okay. So I'll tell you a quick funny story. So um, on my bio page, which goes into my background more extensively, I had this guy look at it who was a top guy in his field, and he looked at it, he goes, "Man, you're an OG." And this is how out of the loop I was. I go, "What does that mean? Original gangster?" I said,
Yeah.
"What a goofy term." All right. Now, granted, everybody has their own language. When I was younger,
Sure.
we had our own language. So so let me tell you a little bit about this. Is really important to understand because sales nowadays is so much different than when it was when I started. So when I started encyclopedias, we had a shoebox, a literal shoebox, and we put 3x5 cards in it with little dividers, either A to Z or 1 to 31 with months. I mean, it
Hmm.
was stupid even back then, but that's all you had. And then ACT came along in the late 80s, early 90s. I started using it in 92. It was the first real sales contact management system. I was a power user on that. And it influenced me in a lot of ways. And there was some real solid principles built into that that are kind of missing nowadays in sales CRM. But here's what happened to me. So my dad and mom in their third retirement moved to Alaska, and his health was going down. I moved up there from Texas. I had a couple businesses in Texas, and I had to restart. And so this is 98, and I spent about 3 months just researching the internet and trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do next? I'm up in Alaska. I know I'm not going to be here forever. And I had 4 key questions. I won't get into those that I was asking myself. And I ended up coming with a 4-part hybrid business model for remote sales. Now, I called it virtual sales back then. This is
Yeah.
98. And basically, and this is not affiliate marketing. This is not internet marketing. This is not direct sales or network marketing. This was remote sales. So it was a new category, and I called it virtual sales. But what happened was during COVID, remote sales went mainstream. Now I
Mm.
didn't think about it until rather recently, but I was a pioneer in remote sales, and
Yeah.
I had a couple projects where I built remote sales teams in the tens of thousands, quite a few in the thousands. I've consulted with companies all the way up that do $1 billion or more a year in sales, $4 billion companies. And but this started simply with doing research and getting a general sense of what was becoming available with technology and what was possible. Now, here was the rub. All of a sudden, this 98, I figured out, oh, I have to make a piece of software now. I
Hmm.
don't know anything about software. What do I do now? And so I had to go through the process of learning that. Now, a lot of people have heard of ClickFunnels or
Hmm.
Infusionsoft, which is now called Keep. I was before those guys.
Yeah.
And I was doing a lot of what they were doing before those guys, but I wasn't trying to be a marketing system. We just built this in to help people generate leads in the remote sales capacity, right?
Hmm.
And so everything that I was doing, a lot of it was like nobody was doing it. Like we were one of the first people to do. I called them lead capture pages. Nowadays they're called landing pages. VSLs. We were using
Hmm.
Flash, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was an animation software. I learned about replicating websites, which means every single sales rep could have his own site. It was an affiliate tracking URL from the guy that invented that. His My first in-house programmer learned how to do that from the guy that invented them.
Yeah.
The guy that is probably the grandfather, the main guy for making autoresponders big was Tom Kulzer from AWeber. I learned about that. So I had all these pieces, and then I combined it into an enterprise level system. So we would capture leads, autoresponders, CRM, tracking, share codes. You could share this throughout, being able to run multiple sales projects through this. And so we got to where we were sending literally 20 million emails a day.
Wow. No
Hey,
way.
um, my server bill was over $30,000 a month. It wasn't one server, by the way. I don't remember how many we had, but we had a lot. And I remember we started hearing about cloud-based computing, and I said to my lead programmer, I said, "Isn't that what we were doing?" He goes, "Yeah, we were doing that before they called it that." So we were doing things just out of ideas and innovation, seeing things are going, and then it absolutely exploded. And the thing about systems is setting up systems is almost polar opposite in personality to being a salesperson.
Mm,
Like you have to be strategic, you have to be methodical, you have to be structured, you have to think about point A to point Z. You continue to have to think about what's next, what's
yep.
next, what's next. Which most salespeople they're wired for, you know, personality, engagement, get the deal, go on to the next thing, right?
Right.
So the thing that I want to communicate, I gave this kind of broad strokes. So the thing I want to communicate with systems today, you have to be very aware of this because this is the make or break with sales teams today. When I first started in sales, you did every piece of the equation. Okay. That's not how it works anymore. You have to break it down into list building, find your ISP, your ideal customer profile, persona, where, you know, two different ways you could say that.
Hmm.
So list building is one thing. Lead generation is another thing. Prospecting is another thing. Qualifying, making the sale is another thing. And then after the sale, service is another thing. And the top performing sales organizations segment those out, right?
Mm,
It's absolutely impossible to do all those and be successful and scale today. And so, you know, you may have to learn all those, you may have to start there, but when you get to a certain level, you have to start realizing what is your strong suit. So I know what my strong suit is. So as I started building out my systems, everything that was not my strong suit, I would delegate out, hire somebody so that I could scale. And keep in mind, this is from a mindset of going from a salesperson to a business owner, or
right.
a starting in sales and using that as a platform to be an entrepreneur, right? Because
Hmm.
if and not everybody is wired to go from sales to business owner. Not
Hmm.
everybody is wired to be an entrepreneur. But I believe every business owner and every entrepreneur needs a solid boots on the ground sales background. Like
Yeah.
what they'll say with sales copywriters, the best sales copywriters are the guys that have sold something like door to door, like pots and pans or encyclopedia or cookware or something like that, because they have that real interaction live with the person, and being able to sell, and then they can transfer that skill set over to copywriting.
Yeah. Wow. That's good. Yeah. I hope somebody's writing down. I think Brandon's writing all this stuff down. He says he's writing 2.5 pages. That was a few minutes ago, 10 minutes ago. Lots
Good.
of good stuff here. Brett, I want to tie in something here to this. That I don't want to assume I know the answer to this, but I want to ask you this because of the practicality behind it, and that is related to somebody that might be on the call today that is struggling with sales. Okay, they might be struggling to close deals or finding consistency. And you just laid out somewhat of a framework that you said. I won't relist them here because I want you to unpack it. But for somebody that's struggling to close deals or find consistency, where should they start when it comes
Okay, that's a
to?
great question because it's an
Yeah,
easy answer, believe it or
uh-huh,
not. Okay, so a number of years ago, I've done consulting on the side here and there. It's not my main thing at all. I mostly have done it because somebody's asked me to do it. Pretty much that's it. Or I got referred and they needed help, and I felt like I could help them. But when in the mid '90s, I went to this class and it was on being a consultant. It was cheap, and I thought I'd go. But it was actually the guy that did it was really really smart guy, and he said some things I was doing, but I didn't have it clarified. I just want to give him credit because and I do this a lot of times where I'll give credit where I get this, and it's just giving you an example of the pieces of your toolbox will come from a lot of different places, right? And he says when you're in now, keep in mind he was talking about consultants. He wasn't talking about salespeople specifically, but he was talking about
uh-huh,
consultants selling and getting their own, their business. So he was
okay,
looking at it from the sales side of being a consultant. And he said you have to look at it on an activity based basis. Okay, so what does that mean? So for example, the biggest problem we have with sales is we're looking at it as a performance basis. So
right,
like if I don't make a sale today, I'm a failure. And the sales manager looks at it, if you don't make a sales today, you failed today, kind of thing.
right,
Okay, a lot of times when people are new and struggling, that's the wrong metric to apply. And the
Mm.
reason why is you're putting a performance standard on them that is not merited. And let me give you an example. If I took a kid that was in high school and all of a sudden, he's a really good high school athlete, and then I put him in a pro level, and then I expected him to perform at a pro level like that, that's unrealistic expectations. It's the
Yeah.
same thing when you take a new salesperson and you put them in a high performance sales situation and you put this like insurmountable performance pressure. Once in a blue moon, you will get a unicorn that can step into that. But that's
Mhm.
a rare occasion, right?
Yeah.
And that's because they have a lot of aptitudes and life skills that allow them to just rocket shit. And then everybody looks like, oh, wow, this guy's a superstar. But if you recruit like that, if you try to build a sales organization like that, good luck. And if somebody's
Mhm.
that good, chances are they're not going to stick around real long. They're going to go look for the next enchilada, right?
Yeah.
And so what we have to do is what is a framework that allows us to operate when we're struggling? And I believe it's activity based. And I'll give you a live story. I like stories. So I had a business. I was doing a lot of trade shows. This was in Dallas, Texas, mid 90s. And I had people, because of I would do presentations and close sales, and people offered me all kinds of jobs all the time. It was my business. I wasn't interested in this. But this one guy was a multimillionaire real estate guy, and he had a client wig out on a deal, and he inherited this custom blind company, and they ship custom blinds all over the country, for coverings for your windows.
Uh-huh.
And sales was sucking. I came in, looked at what they were doing. The whole thing was a disaster. It was a pretty easy fix. Now I'm going to teach you a few things here if you're paying attention. So number one, this is in the mid 90s. Dallas was famous for telemarketers, especially ATT, but there was massive telemarketing centers in Dallas at the time. And so I ran ads for telemarketers, and the influx of applications I got was numerous. The quality of the people was garbage level. Like character was level, it was garbage. Skill level was garbage. It was like, whoa. And so then I had to rethink everything. Okay, so how am I going to flip this around when what I had to work with wasn't good? And so then I thought, okay, I'm going to go after really high quality people from a customer service level. But if I run an ad like that, then I'm going to get people that if I flip them into a sales job, they're going to quit because it was misleading, right? So
Mhm.
that meant I had to change my whole sales process. So I changed the sales process to be customer service, outreach oriented, question-based oriented, survey oriented. And when I hired these people, what I did is I created a sales direct response package that did all the selling. And all these people had to do was dial, ask a few questions, and then we set up the questions to where if we got a positive response, we send them out a package. And most times, if we nailed the right person, they proactively call back. And our
Mm.
follow-up was just as a reminder. But here's what I want to teach you is that, and this is where we get into activity-based goals. And if you apply this, this is a game changer for anybody that's struggling in sales with prospecting or closing deals or numbers. So this is what I said to him. Now, back then we had headsets, but we had to manual dial the phone.
Mhm.
Okay. You take the phone, younger people don't even know what these are. You take that
Rotary.
handset off, you
Uh-huh.
leave the button sticking up, and then you would dial, and then every call you'd press the thing, and you wouldn't hang up. It was totally manual. And so the requirement was, and I learned this when I was a stockbroker from 2 high level phone telemarketing courses I went through, was you don't hang up the phone. And I wanted 300 dials a day. Now this is
Wow.
not power dialers. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is manual dial. And
Uh-huh.
so the people would come in, I said, okay, your goal is to make 300 dials a day. Okay. And they'd say, and then what do we say? And I said, whatever you want. And they would look at me like I was nuts. And they go, what do you mean? I said, say whatever you want to say. I don't care. And so usually, and I'll come back to this in a minute. So usually it would take them about Tuesday or Wednesday of the following week to get to 300 dials a day. Now, why? Because that's an endurance thing. Like,
Absolutely.
and so you mentally and physically have to get disciplined to do that. So what was that? That was an activity-based goal, right?
Mm.
And the
Yeah.
hardest thing to do is make the dials, right? So I want to get them disciplined and comfortable making the dials with zero performance pressure. You see what I'm saying? So I
Yeah.
segmented the highest activity that I wanted, which was just making the dials, No performance pressure. Okay, that was number one. Now, second segment, what was the next thing I wanted out of that? I wanted them to be themselves. If I don't tell them what to say or how to say it, then what do they have to work with? So they didn't have to, I did not mess with who they were. Because remember, when I was hiring good people, right? At Southwest Airlines used to have an ad that said, we don't train people to be nice, we hire nice people. Oh, okay. You shouldn't have to train people to be nice. Okay. You hire people that have the aptitudes,
right,
or the base. When I'm building a sales team, oftentimes, depending on the project, I like inexperienced people because they're a clean slate. But if they have all the raw materials that can be molded, then I have a gem in the rough. I like that because then I'm not dealing with all the garbage, the bad training, the bad stuff that was put in by all the previous things that caused them to be jaded. Or look at people like cogs. So the next thing was to be themselves. Okay. So after we get in about a week and a half of doing this, guess what? The two things I needed most was discipline to dial and be themselves. Everything after that was easy. So then I laid, because the metric for success was one thing: make the dials. So if you make the dials and you mentally take away the performance pressure, and here's another attitude: I'm not calling to sell. I'm not calling to qualify. I'm actually calling. This is a power thing. I can't tell you how many times this is absolutely transformed the way people do prospecting. And then you're not trying to qualify. You're simply there to disqualify. You're disqualifying. Make a friend, disqualify. And do it quickly and move on. So if you have a metric for, if your SOP is 300 dials a day, that puts a kind of a sense of urgency to get through that in a nice, friendly manner, and you're disqualifying. And if you get 1 or 2 leads an hour, you're great. Now, there's processes you build into that, but the point is activity trumps everything. Activity trumps everything. Take away the performance metric. You're not there yet. Okay? Once you start accomplishing performance-based goals by having the activity, then you can say, like, I'm getting. And it's really hard, especially with prospecting. If you go in and go, you put this performance pressures, I'm going to get 3 leads an hour. Well, you have no idea if you're really going to get that, because the list may be bad, the time of year may be different, the offer. All you can control is what you control is that's the activity. Now you can evaluate other things. That's a different thing than the activity and getting over those slumps.
That's awesome. Absolutely.
Cool.
Quick question that got dropped up here. Matt was asking, do you have a mastermind?
Nah. But, if somebody wants to touch base with me on anything, we can talk about it. But, I've got a number of other projects I do. I have done some in the past. And here's the thing about me. I have mostly done it for my own projects, but people come to me on, depending on what they need help with. But I'm not a guy that does coaching or masterminds like that for, business.
Sure. Okay. No, good to know.
Yeah.
Thinking of where we're at right now from a technological standpoint, a couple of things that come to mind are, how to balance the human connection aspect of it with technology.
Okay.
And so that's kind of one lane I want to drop right there.
Okay, let's stay on that one because that's a great question, and I've got an answer for that if you're ready.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Cool. So, and the reason why I jump right on that is because that was actually a major theme of what I started talking about in the late 90s. Okay. Now we have to keep in something. We have to segment what's going on. An internet marketer, by and large, doesn't want to talk to people. They want to use, all this automation, buying ads, all that stuff. Great. Internet marketer, that's one category. Affiliate marketers, they're kind of the same category, but both of those, I put them in the same category because they're kind of hands off, right? And then you have, direct sales or network marketing, which is very relationship oriented. A lot of people, when they start bringing systems, they collapse, though there's some top level guys that have learned how to integrate it. But when I first started doing this, I was very aware about talking about the difference. And what do I mean by that? And that is, the whole point of systems and automation is to allow you to have more time to personally connect and build relationships with your best prospects and your best customers.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you make this journey, what you're constantly doing is taking the things that keep you from doing that, whether it's delegating to a VA or building out a system or a process and putting it in some kind of funnel or automation so that you can engage personally, whether it's Zoom meetings, by phone, whatever it is, because that's the highest level of connectivity. In fact, that is the highest level of competitive advantage today, even more so. And when I first started saying this in the late 90s, is that the technology and the automation was about giving you more time to spend with your best prospects and your customers and your best customers.
Yeah.
It was a real radical thing because people weren't even using automation processes.
Mm.
And I spent a couple years with people. Now, keep in mind, we're talking about sales. And matter of fact, two of the biggest gurus I had in my life, Dan Kennedy and Jay Abraham, they're like, Dan Kennedy's like the godfather, blue collar godfather of marketing, and Dan Kennedy's like the white collar of marketing. That's how I segment those two. But both really genius guys in their own right, their own lanes. Both of them in the late 90s were poo-pooing the internet as a marketing vehicle. They literally in their communication said it was a fad because they didn't see it, they didn't understand it, and they weren't applying it. Both of them have vastly changed their tune now. But I spent 2 years with people saying on the remote sales side, that'll never work. You can't do sales like that. Don't waste your time, blah, blah, blah. I listened to that for a couple of years. And then I basically, I think you guys are wrong. And I'm going to go prove different. And the difference was how I used it, how I applied it. And the problem with it is a lot of salespeople is they're trying to make the automation and the sales do too much. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like they're like, I want to have it all automated. And if that's what you want, you need to be an internet marketer because that's a completely different thing. And I get it if that's your thing.
Point.
I like sales. I like relationships. I like connecting with people. I personally would find internet marketing or straight affiliate marketing boring as all get out. Right now, part of it probably has to do with my generation. Part of it, but I've been on the cutting edge of sales automation, but part of it has to do with what I like. I like connecting with people. I like those relationships. Well, you don't really see that in internet marketing or affiliate marketing. You see that maybe with all the bros, they get together in their groups and they, share each other's lists and cross market everybody, that kind of relationship. But you don't see it with their clients or customers. Again, they're just running a straight system, drive sales, and that's a thing, and for those guys that like it, or that's where you want to be, but you do need to look at the difference. If you're in sales, it's about your relationships. And anybody that tells you differently, they're not going to be in the business long term, or they're not going to get repeat customers, or they're not going to get referrals, right? And just really quickly before we go to the next question is and I'm just going to throw this in so that you have the right mindset about sales. A lot of people think their number one goal is to get a customer. It's not. Your number one goal is not only to get a repeat customer, but it's to have your customers become raving fans. And when they become raving fans, you get testimonials and referrals. And referrals are your best kind of business. Nothing beats referrals because they're already pre-sold because somebody trusts refer you. So referrals are ultimately what you're getting for. And testimonials will do a much better of satisfied customers will do a much better job selling for you than you selling yourself, right? So your end goal is not a sale, but it's to have testimonials and it's to have referrals. And keep that
that's
in mind.
good.
And so that puts you on performance basis of always doing a stellar job and keeping your customers' best interests in mind.
That is so true and so good. I'm so timely, I would say too. Literally right before I was about to hop on a call with you, I was on the phone with the client. They've been in business for a little bit over 2 years, and we started helping them build out their systems, started helping them beef up their online reputation, right, with reviews and the perception that they were receiving online. And one of the first things he says to me, he was in a wonderful mood, and he's like, Gordie, we've had the best month ever. And I was like, that's awesome, man. I was like, best month as in in the month of January since you started, like Januaries, right? The last 3 Januaries in a cycle. He's like, no, we've had the best month in our whole time in business.
Wow.
And I was like, and that's the power of reputation. That's the power of a good name. That's the power of
Well,
getting
no, no, that's the byproduct. The
the
power is
byproduct.
what a good
Yeah,
job
yeah,
you did. The power was that you, because of what you did in their situation, the end result was the natural end
yeah.
result was. But the cool thing about that is it allows you to daisy chain your business, right?
Hmm.
Because happy customers, except if they don't want their competition to know, but happy clients and customers are about sharing that because they can't help themselves. Yeah, you go to
Yeah,
a good restaurant, you love the food, dude. Go eat here. Food was
yeah,
amazing,
yeah.
right?
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's so good. Yeah.
yeah.
I know we're coming up here close on time. I want to get a
Yeah,
couple
if
final
you need to go a
questions in
little,
here.
if you want to go a little longer, that's cool. Or we could do another session.
Okay.
I'm cool. I always keep some back end time available.
Okay. Awesome. I just want to tap in your mind a little bit more, so yourself as well, but with the systems piece, because I think it's really important, especially with technology and where
Oh yeah.
technology is at right now. And to your point earlier, some people want it to do all the work for them and they don't want to, invest in the relational side of it. And I think that's a mistake as well. But what would you say is a bit of advice for somebody that's like struggling to get their systems in place and they're maybe overwhelmed to trying to build their own systems or strategies for scaling their business? Like what
Okay,
would be,
that's a great question. Okay, first of all, um, let me just say number one, it's really hard if you're starting out and you don't know what to do. So that's a given. All
yeah.
right. So I'm gonna have to reference a couple things real quickly in my head. Okay, you have to look at everything's a skill set, right? So building systems and being in sales, two completely different skill sets. Not most salespeople do not have the ability to do that. The other challenge you have is if you're a business owner or entrepreneur, there's so many hats you're wearing, trying to do it all is really, really difficult. Now, I can say this with 100% accuracy. If I was having to start brand new and knowing what I know now through everything that I've learned and trying to do sales and systems at the same time right now, I don't know if I could do it.
Mm,
And the reason why is it's so overwhelming right now.
yeah.
When I started, if you wanted an app, you with what I was doing, you had to create it. Right
Yeah.
now, you want an app, and there's like 40 different versions,
Right.
and there's new ones coming on every day. And the one you just started using is out of date 6 months from now. And do you
Right.
stay or do you switch? And then what who do you listen to in advice? Webinars work, webinars don't work. Use a PDF. Do ads, don't do ads. Everybody's got a different philosophy. And then the other challenge you have is people are coming in and saying, okay, my way is the only way. No, it's not. And,
Hmm.
and a lot of times when people come into a guy, it's not to say that their system doesn't work, but a lot of times when people start promoting a certain system, it's it's kind of after it's worn out. And so
Hmm.
now it's not so much working for them. So now they're selling, kind of a reiteration that's 6 months past prime kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's a common thing. So we have to keep in mind what's the number one thing you need to focus on if you're in sales, and that's leads. Okay, so
Hmm.
if I was going to say your number one thing is leads, and there's lots of ways that you can do it. You can do it with paid ads, which I am not a fan of paid ads unless you've got stuff that's working in other ways. And just give me an idea, there's all kinds of ways. There's LinkedIn automation, there's cold email, unless you're consumer to consumer. There's postcards. There's a lot of different channels, but think about it like this. The old Western movies had covered wagons, right? And they had a hub in the middle of the wheel, the wagon
Uh-huh.
wheel, wooden wheel. It had spokes, right? And
Right.
so every spoke added strength to the wheel. If one spoke broke, no big deal. Two, you're okay. Maybe three, the wheel breaks. Most businesses have one spoke, right? And
Mm.
if that spoke, and all of a sudden they go, oh, Facebook shut down my account, or my Facebook ads
Right.
aren't pulling anymore. I had a friend that had
Done.
a business that was based on a Google algorithm hack. He was making like 25, 30 grand a month, and they changed the algorithm, this is a while back, and he went from making 25, 30 grand a month to zero in like 30
Wow.
days, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's because he had one spoke. He was out of
Yep.
business like that. And so the first thing you have to do is identify where is your best source of leads with your budget.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many people that specialize in aspects of this, like they know how to use certain databases. This is one of the things, especially if you're B2B, the amount of business to business databases that are available nowadays are mind blowing. The
Yep.
amount of tools that you can use for LinkedIn or cold email or Facebook, all these automation, they're mind blowing. Then you got to figure out, what they are and how they use. That's really tough. So it depends. A lot of times with salespeople, are they responsible for their lead gen? Not usually. Usually you'll have somebody that is specifically doing that, and the salespeople are working the leads. So then you have the aspect of managing your sales in your CRM. Typically companies provide that and they do the training on that. Most of them are very poorly set up and managed. So that's kind of tough for the salespeople to get out. But if I had to give one piece of advice to every salesperson is work on your off hours, not during your selling hours, but 2 to 3 hours a day, work on mastering lead gen.
Mm.
Mastering lead gen, because I don't care if as a salesperson, you're going to want extra. Every top salesperson that I ever have known, they generate leads beyond their company. Okay?
Mm.
That's number one. Number
Mm-hmm.
two, once you get into business, you're going to have to generate leads.
Right.
Everything happens when you generate leads. I do have a little consulting project I'm working on right now, and I'll just give you a little tip on what I do. The number one thing when I'm working on a project is I look in, and everything's usually a mess. That's why they ask for help, right? I expect a mess, right? And because the people don't know what they don't know, otherwise things would be working. They wouldn't need help. But the number one thing after I identify what the major problems are, and usually they're pretty much the same, is I want a proper lead gen set up right away. And the reason why is the lead gen helps you identify what your sales process should be in order to scale it. It also helps you identify everything that's working and not working. And it also helps you frame what your SOP should be. There's nothing
Mm-hmm.
like leads coming in real time, even if you don't have everything working, but it forces you, this ain't working, that ain't working. I adjust this. And you could just go down and daisy chain. And the whole
Yeah.
idea is to look for everything that's not working and either fix it or change it or enhance it, upgrade it, whatever it is. But you're just going down the thing and going, what's working, what's not working, what's working. So you're basically problem solving. You're real time
Mm-hmm.
problem solving and seeing what's working. Well, that requires a collaboration of a couple people at least. Somebody that's doing the lead gen, somebody that's looking at the sales system, and then the salesperson that's in the fire, trying to
Yeah.
make it happen. So it's a collaborative thing. Trying to do it by yourself, very difficult.
Yeah. Let me simplify that too, if we could,
Okay.
on the lead gen side. So not paid ad, not the paid front, but organic, and we're talking about lead gen specifically.
Yeah, I
'Cause I don't
think.
want
Yeah,
to.
I think doing paid ads out of the gate, if you don't have your systems and process out, is a big fat waste of money,
Yep.
because you don't really know what you're doing yet in order to
Exactly.
get sales. And you have to. It's like this: you are not going to be mastering anything in life unless you start at the basic level, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
basic level is, this organic stuff. And what are some tools to automate it? But you have to learn the ropes of what works and doesn't work. When you start paying somebody to place your ads, that's all they're doing. They're not
Yep.
figuring out your sales process or
Right.
anything. They're just putting ads, taking your money, and maybe
Yep.
you get leads. And I can't tell you how many times I hear this where there's guys that do lead gen, and then they didn't even check as a business, and they didn't even check to see if the company has a sales process at
To get the
all or
lead.
that works. And then
Yeah.
they generate the leads, and then the people that are paying for the leads go, well, what do we do with these?
Mm-hmm.
Seriously, I'm not kidding. You cannot believe how often that happens, because they don't even have their sales process in place.
Right. Yeah, that's big. Wow. Well, a couple thoughts I want to leave listeners with. This has been awesome, Brett. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, this has been hugely valuable. I hope everybody else that's listening, that you're taking a ton of um, advice from this, ton of insight, and you're gonna be able to apply it to yourselves as well. We're just cracking the surface.
Yeah,
I plan
absolutely.
on bringing Brett back around
Ah!
and doing it again. and again and again. But Brett, if you could share one principle or system, you've shared several already, but if you could share a principle that you believe every entrepreneur must adopt, what would that be?
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay. Every entrepreneur is a general. You have to understand, if you're an entrepreneur, you're weird. Okay. And I mean that in a good way.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
you are wired differently, and you have to be okay with that. You think differently, you live differently, your brain, it works differently. Everything about you is generally differently. And that's a good thing. That makes you a pioneer, so to speak. And you're creating things, you're doing things differently. You got to be okay with that, right?
yeah.
You got to be, and that doesn't mean it's easy. A lot of times you are really pushing the envelope, and it's stressful and it's hard. So the number one thing I would say is you really have to follow your passion, and you really have to follow your gut intuition. And I'll give you a funny story. So the guy that founded FedEx, when he was in college, he wrote his thesis was for this business model for FedEx, where you had the hubs, where you flew it into the hub, the package into the hub, and then you flew it out. Back then, it was laughed at. He got ridiculed. Everybody thought he was an idiot. Instead of going A to B, you brought everything into a hub and then shot it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it got to the point where, and I heard this at a really high-end marketing conference. This was the VP of FedEx when they first started out. And he said it got to the point where they didn't have enough money to make payroll. So the CEO of the company flew to Vegas, and he bet what he had on the roulette table, and
No
he won.
way. Wow.
And he made payroll, and then the rest was history. And so you have to, your belief, your intuition, your drive
Mm.
are your superpowers. And then, with me, I have a few trusted advisors that I run things off when I feel like, I might be stepping out of my framework. And then, I believe in God. And so some people use the word intuition, and I use the word spirit led, but I'm very conscious of that. But none of that makes things easy or simple. It just is those things that help you understand yourself a little better, so you can walk this out. And as we finish up, take Elon Musk, for example. If you follow the news stories about him, whether you like him or not, he's so fascinating because he makes a decision like with Twitter, and the next thing it's going to collapse his entire empire of businesses, and the next thing he pulls it out of his hat and it's connected to all these other things. And it's the data in Twitter or X is going to feed Neuralink, and now he's going to connect it to his cell phone network where people don't have web access. I mean, it's crazy, right? So here's a guy that's just heads and tails beyond most people's thinking bandwidth, and he has the money to do about anything else. But look at the ups and downs this guy has. One day he's awesome, the next day he's like, the most evil man on the planet. But that's the life of an entrepreneur. The ups and downs, it's how you're wired. It's not easy, it's not simple, but you got to embrace who you are.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Wow. Good way to end it there, Brett. Again, I appreciate you a ton, bro.
Thanks for having me on.
You got it.
For everybody else. And if anybody wants to touch base with me, get a hold of Gordie, and he can,
connect the dots.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Okay. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it, brother.
You bet.